What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. As always, I'm your co-host, Marcus. Welcome back. Joined by my co-host, Mason. Mason, how are you today, man? We got our Week 10 early previews. We're doing things a little different this week, guys. We're going to go after some of these, I guess you could call them secondary matchups, right? That's what we're going to do on Sundays from now on. Go after some of these kind of secondary matchups. We've got Oregon at Michigan, Texas A&M at South Carolina, Kentucky at Tennessee, Ole Miss at Arkansas, Indiana at Michigan State that we're going to be talking today. And then before we do all that, though, we're going to dive through our updated top 25 going into Week 10. How you doing, bud?
Doing good, man. Another good week of college football. These conference races are lining up. We're starting to see some movement in the conference races. We're down to one undefeated SEC team now in Texas A&M. We're going to talk about them today, and it looks like Oregon is a front runner for the Big Ten at this point. They seem to have separated themselves in that conference. A lot going on in the Big 12. There's still some parity in the ACC, I would say. There's just a lot of conference races that are kind of tightening up as we get down the home stretch here. And these games that we talk about tonight are going to affect the conference landscape, I think. And, coming up on Tuesday, we're going to break down some of the key matchups. We've got four of the bigger games, what we would consider bigger games, to break down. Of course, Ohio State and Penn State, along with a few others. But
Florida at Georgia, Pitt at SMU, Louisville at Clemson. Just so y'all know.
So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit that notification so you know when we go live on Tuesday. And maybe just hit the like button if you're hearing this right now. Let's get the good word out there. Mark, I did you a favor here. That's usually your job to ask for the subscribes and the likes, but did you a little favor there. Also, y'all, make sure you're commenting as well. It helps us with the live show a lot, and we'll read your comments in between our segments as well. But Mark, let's get into it, man.
Let's jump into it, shall we? We shall. Top 25, front and center. Here we go. This is our 11 through 25. We don't go team by team here, but we do want to kind of give some explanations for some of this stuff and talk about some of the stuff that's, fresh on our mind. We got to welcome in a couple of teams into the top 25, first of all, making their very first appearance into the top 25 here on First and Long. Washington State and Memphis, each team with a loss apiece coming in there at 24 and 25. Look, I mean, Memphis and the AAC, they're kind of I guess, a secondary shot at maybe winning that conference. Watch out, Washington State's going to win the Pac-2. I don't know, what really comes of that, or go look at Washington State's schedule. I mean, it's just not, not very good. Memphis had played Navy earlier this year, played them pretty tight, I guess, but wasn't able to come out on top on that one. So a couple of decent teams there. We're kind of at a point where we have to throw a couple of them there at the bottom. So Washington State, Memphis, you get your 20 seconds of fame here on the First and Long College Football Show. Illinois drops down to 23rd. Illinois has only got a couple of losses this season, at this point, and they're to Penn State and Oregon. So whereas they do got two losses, they still deserve to be in the top 25 with the fact that, I mean, those are some of the best losses that you can get, right? We've got Colorado creeping up to 22. I think we had them around 25 last week. This is as surprising to me as it is to maybe you, I guess, but it's very surprising to me. If you would have told me, 10 weeks ago that we were going to have Colorado in our Week 10 top 25, I would have called you crazy. I mean, I would just flat out would have called you crazy, probably right here on air. 21, Alabama. Alabama absolutely thumps Missouri this week. We don't have to really go into that. We know why Alabama's where they're at. SMU, watch out for SMU, guys. Now, SMU turns the ball over a billion times this week. They still figure out a way to win. and SMU's got some big games in front of them where they're going to be able to make a name for themselves. And I'm just going to tell you, nobody wants it more than SMU. I mean, so they go into some of these matchups as underdogs here at the end of the season. Nobody wants it more than this program. This is a program that came into the ACC and deferred all payments and money for multiple years to be able to join that conference. They're hungry, man. They're absolutely hungry, and they've got a big game coming up this week. Pitt at SMU. That's going to be a big one, considering the fact that Pitt over there ranked at number 15. I'll go ahead and knock them out while we're talking about them. Mason, poked holes all in the Pitt Panthers last night. If you watched the show with us last night, just poking holes all in my Pitt Panthers. Could not believe it. We're going to talk more about those Pitt Panthers and the schedule that they've played or lack thereof, however you want to look at it. But Pitt has navigated their way to an undefeated season so far. That's really good for Pitt. Again, we've talked about it week after week now. We're separating good stories from good football teams. I'm not so sure that Pitt, while I do think Pitt is a decent football team. I don't think they're horrible, but they're probably in all reality, shouldn't be any higher than 20 as far as in the country. But this is where we're at in the season. I mean, they're undefeated and they deserve to be at 15 at this point. But in all reality, I think they're maybe more of a top 20 to top 25-ish team. But you got to tip your cap when you win all your ball games. Army 19. We've talked about Army. Eventually, we're going to have a game to talk about here on the show, but again, we don't. Ole Miss at 18. LSU sinks to 17 after the loss to Texas A&M. I bumped Kansas State down some after struggling with Kansas. I know it was a rivalry game. Kansas State just shows us over and over again that they are very beatable. I like Kansas State in the Big 12, but my God, I mean they can be beat, and they can be beat multiple different ways. And Kansas almost did it this week, a team that's won 2 games this year. So I don't know. I'm a little weary about Kansas State at this point. Boise State, we slide them up to 14. They did their thing against UNLV this week. They absolutely deserve it. Only loss they've got is to Oregon, and that is the best kind of loss you can have in the country, as they are, spoiler alert, still number 1. Notre Dame at 13 again. I told y'all I ain't moving Notre Dame until I got a real good reason to, and they're going to stay right there at 13 until further notice. Texas at 12. Texas kind of proved me right last week, guys. Look, I'm not going to lie. Last week I was a little bit. I had a little bit of the redneck red ass, if you will. I don't know if you've heard those. Ever heard of that type of terminology? But it's where the red ass is where you get a little upset, maybe with a team or a fan base, and maybe I was upset a little bit with both last week. But a lot of what I said about the offense, about this team, I really did mean it. And I think that Texas has got some issues, man. I don't think that they're the team that everybody thought they were 3 weeks ago. Are they a bad team? No, they're not a bad team. But I think they're more of a defensive-led football team than they are offensively at this point. And that's weird to say from a Steve Sarkisian group. Tennessee at number 11. Tennessee's going to be facing off with Kentucky this week. We're going to talk about that game today. And so I'm going to save a little bit of my Tennessee talk. But we've got Tennessee at 11. Really, really good defense. I'm interested to see if Tennessee can work a little bit more on the passing game this week. We know what the run game is. It's one of the best in the country. And that's bad news for Kentucky as we're going into that breakdown shortly. What are your thoughts 11 through 25, Mason?
I like the group. Not a whole lot of shaking up at this point in the season. There's with last week, there just weren't a ton of upsets. You do have LSU dropping down. I mean, that was a big game. That game could have gone either way, really. A lot of mistakes late in that second half, particularly by Garrett Nussmeier. But don't count LSU out just yet. I mean, they're a one-loss SEC team or one loss in the SEC at this point. They could definitely climb back in this thing. A lot's got to go their way. They're going to need some teams to lose for them to have a path to the SEC championship game. But looking pretty good right now, I think, for the Tigers. Just probably got caught up in a tough part of their schedule where they had 3 emotional games back to back to back. This week they're going to have a bye before going on to play Alabama. That game's going to be at home, by the way, a huge game for the Tigers and for the Tide, as that one could shape up to be really a phenomenal game when you look at it. But we'll talk about that again next week, as both teams are going to be on a bye. I thought Alabama, speaking of them, they handled business against Missouri. You really can't ask for much more. I do think that Alabama's offense is a little bit tough to watch right now, but the defense just came out and absolutely, did what they were supposed to do. I mean, Missouri couldn't score a single point. You can't ask for much more out of your defense if you're the Tide. Colorado, once again, not just winning, but covering. I mean, they've looked really good the past few weeks and figure to be a Big 12 championship contender now, which is something that I did not have on my bingo card going into the season, but they continue to prove me wrong and to prove a lot of people in America wrong. So you gotta tip your cap to the Buffs there. And what they've been able to do, not just in the transfer portal going into the season, but as they have continued to develop, in particular on the defensive side of the football and up front on that defense. It's been really, really pretty impressive. Pretty impressive to see there. Let's see. Notre Dame, big win over Navy, I would say. It's tough with as easy of a schedule as Notre Dame plays to find those big wins. We're going to see in a couple weeks when they play Army, kind of if they can replicate that sort of dominance over a service academy team that is much better than in years past. But I think that they're kind of shaping up to be a team that actually does end up making the playoffs if they can continue to win. And I think at this point, Notre Dame's got to win out after that early loss to NIU that seems to get further and further away from our memory. But and then last team I'll talk about is Boise State. Really big win over UNLV. That was a tough win for them going to UNLV and playing that team. I thought their defense stepped up and really played well in key moments, and that was the difference in the football game, in my opinion. Ashton Jeanty pretty much got held in check, had less than 150 yards, which is pretty incredible, actually, going up against him. I think he's probably the best running back in the country. But yeah, I like 11 through 25. Let's get in the top 10.
Let's do it. Texas A&M, I slid them up to number 10 this week. That was a big win, obviously, this past week at, excuse me, not at LSU, but hosting LSU. Marcel Reed comes in the second half of that football game and really just changed the whole complexion of the game. I mean, I don't know really any other way to put it. We're going to talk some Texas A&M football today. They're going to be going on the road to Williams-Brice Stadium, facing off against South Carolina. And I'm really interested to see how this team responds to so much positivity over the last few weeks. It's been an emotional last few weeks for Texas A&M as they absolutely thump Missouri at home. You get LSU at home, and I guess you could really kind of call that a thumping right there at the end of that football game. That second half made the comeback there. Texas A&M has got some momentum. I'm really interested to see, again, how this team handles the emotional victory last week. I mean, I'm sure it's the energy is high as hell there at Kyle Field and at Texas A&M. How do you handle that now that you got to go on the road? We'll see. Number 9, Ohio State. Color me unimpressed with what I saw this Saturday with Ohio State against Nebraska. This offensive line for Ohio State has got issues, just like we talked about in the preseason. I was joking around with Mason yesterday. I say, you remember way back at the beginning of the season when Ohio State told us that we were crazy because we had questions about this offensive line and they're the best offensive line in the country, hands down. That was not true then. It never was. And it sure as hell ain't true now. Now that Ohio State's got guys hurt at this point. So there's questions to be answered as they're gearing up for a really big game in Happy Valley this weekend. So we're going to have to really – that's a game we're going to talk about on Tuesday, not today. We'll talk about that one on Tuesday. So come back and hang out with us and we'll have more on that game and the health of these two teams. Obviously, there's some health concerns for Penn State as well. Penn State we'll talk about here in a minute. Iowa State, again, this is not a team that I'm overly impressed with, Mason. I think I actually bumped them down a little bit from the week before. And it had more to do with people that I wanted to move up ahead of them and not so much to do with Iowa State. But, just looking back at their body of work this year, it's just not really all that impressive. I'll just be honest with you. I mean, they're undefeated. That's the most impressive part. And that's, the part that matters at this point. But as the schedule heats up here for Iowa State, I certainly expect them to falter at some point. Number 7, Clemson. This team has been on the rise pretty much all year after they took their beat down in week 1 against Georgia. If there's one thing to kind of pick out with Clemson, I don't know that their defense is super deep. Go back and look at some of the totals they've given up this year, over 30 points in multiple games, some in which were teams that don't have a very good offense. I'm about to beat my dog's ass over there lapping water like a horse. Sorry if y'all hear that, but
we can't
number
hear
6. Okay, well, good, because I sure as hell can. Number 6, BYU. So rude. I mean, just how rude. I pay all the bills around here, and then this thing gonna come in here and all right. BYU does what they were supposed to do this week. They went all the way across the country to Central Florida, took care of business. There's very little to grab onto with BYU that you don't like, right? I mean, they're just pretty well rounded, and they got out to an early lead against UCF. That's exactly what you got to do to UCF, by the way. If you can get out against an early lead against that team, they're not going to run their way back to victory. Now they have come back in one game this year, but that wasn't BYU. I can promise you. BYU looks to be the strongest group in the Big 12 to me right this second. The one with the least amount of flaws, anyway. What do you think about 6 through 10?
Yeah, I think starting with BYU at 6, this is a team, like I said last night, they just play really good complementary football. They're a defensive-led group. The offense does well to extend drives and give the defense a break and really lean on the defense. They play special teams well. They play field position well. Pretty well-rounded, pretty well-coached team, I think, all in all. I'd like to see a little bit more out of the offense. I'd like to see the BYU get going a little bit more, but nonetheless, I mean, Retzlaff has had a really good season so far for what he is asked to do. But BYU very solid there in the Big 12. They look like the front runner. Clemson was on a bye this week, but we've seen Cade Klubnik really surge since the Georgia game in week 1. And he's really placed himself in a Heisman contention sort of race here. This is a guy who I would not be surprised at this point to see him in New York at the end of the season. And that's not something that I thought I would be saying because I was not a huge Klubnik fan going into the season. And it seems like he's sort of righted the course there under Garrett Riley. Really got the system down there. And I think that their defense is still really good. They've given up some, more points than they have in years past, but ultimately, I think this defense is solid enough to win the ACC potentially if they can get over the hump against Miami and also against Louisville, which is a game that we'll talk about on Tuesday, like you said. The Cyclones at number 8, just really want to see what they do against some better opponents. At this point, they have not really seen the they haven't had the games yet to really be tested, but those will come towards the end of the year. But definitely look like a team that can potentially win the Big 12. Just probably going to need to win out at this point with the way BYU's playing, with the way Colorado is sort of surging. Anxious to see what they do moving forward, but at this point, I mean, you got to tip your cap to what they've done so far this season. And then Ohio State, like you said, not a great outing against Nebraska. This was a team that went out and make no doubts about it. They just went out and bought a ton of players. And so far, they really don't have a ton to show for it. No big wins yet. That's not really their fault for having an easy first half of their schedule. But as they get into the bulk of their schedule, they got Penn State coming up this week, Indiana down the road, which looks like a really good game potentially. We'll see what Ohio State is made of moving forward. But not a good outing for them offensively. Couldn't run the ball against Nebraska, which I mean they do have a good running defense, but when you're Ohio State, you expect to get a push up front, and they did not do so this week. Pretty lackluster performance by them. And then Texas A&M, huge win, best win of the season by far for the Aggies, and they're looking to build on that momentum, and as they gear up for South Carolina, which is a closer game by Vegas's odds than you might imagine. We'll be breaking that one down here in just a minute, but I agree with 6 through 10 at this point.
Well, then I think you'll certainly agree with 1 through 5. 1 through 10 was what I felt the most confident about as far as putting this top 25 together. The ones under that, I feel like you could move them around a bit, but let me know in the comment section. I'd love to argue with you about it because I looked at this every which way today, and it took me way too long to write this list out. And I went through, I don't know, 7 sheets of paper doing it. I wrote it. Nope, don't like it. Got to redo it. Wrote it. Got to redo it. I mean, just over and over. Number 1, we got Oregon. No surprises there. Okay. Oregon has been number 1 on our top 25 since they beat Ohio State at home. Never had Texas at number 1 on this show because they never deserved to be. And lo and behold, look what we're starting to see now. Oregon is the number 1 team. There's no doubt about that. They got the best win. They got no losses. It's pretty basic. Georgia at number 2. Georgia has got arguably the best win. Maybe the second or third best win, however you want to put it, however you want to frame it. Georgia's got one of the best wins. They went on the road and beat the reigning number 1 team at that point, right? And Georgia has a loss, and it's to Alabama, who's in the top 25 here. So if Georgia, I'd love to see Georgia and Alabama play again. I don't know if we're going to get the pleasure of seeing that this year. Alabama's got Georgia's number for whatever reason, and that is Georgia's 1 loss. And if that's the only loss Georgia's got or any team's got, that's a pretty decent one, I guess. And it was on the road at Alabama as well. So, we're at that point where we're justifying who's got the best loss here and who's got the best wins. And Georgia has one of each. Penn State at number 3. Do I think that Penn State's the 3rd best team in the country? You might ask. No, I don't. I don't actually think that Penn State's the 3rd best team in the country, but do they deserve to be ranked number 3 in this ranking? Absolutely they do. Absolutely they do. They've got top 25 wins. They have, first of all, beat everybody that they played. We've got a big matchup coming up. They're going to be hosting Ohio State this week. That's going to be a Tuesday talk there. That's not going to be tonight. That's a big game. We'll have all the graphics set up, all the stats, all the deep dive stuff that you're going to want to get ready to bet on that game or watch that game on Saturday. So come and join us Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern for our preview and prediction show and the show in which we do all of our big game breakdowns. Number 4, you've got Miami. Miami is a very exciting team to watch. I don't think the defense is as good as we thought. But then again, Miami is in that ACC bubble in which they have not played a very tough schedule. I mean, they played. It's not Miami's fault that Florida is so far gone. It's not even funny, and that's who Miami started off the year playing, right? They scheduled that game years in advance thinking, I mean, how are you supposed to, I guess, necessarily predict that Florida's going to be bad other than the fact that they've been bad for a few years in a row? Miami went out there, whooped their hiney, and they've done that for the most part. Offensively, they're really, really good. Always score a bunch of points. If the defense can get things figured out and show up game in and game out and be more consistent, Miami could be one of the. They're already top 4, but they could be one of the top 2 teams in the country. But their defense just hasn't showed us that, and they like to play from behind. We've seen Miami play from behind a lot this season, but they were able to take care of Florida State, no problem. One of the worst Power 4 programs in college football at this point. But we've got Miami at number 4. They're hanging around number 4, and I don't really see them going anywhere until we can get them a formidable opponent that is able to, go pound for pound with them. Number 5, Indiana. This team we've been paying attention to for weeks in a row now. Newsflash, they're really good. Don't know when Curtis Rourke is coming back, the quarterback. Didn't stop Indiana this past weekend from going ahead and covering the spread and doing what they needed to do. And that's a trend this year, guys. Indiana has yet to trail in a football game. They've yet to defeat an opponent by less than 10 points this season. And most of those have been multiple touchdowns they've beat these opponents by. So is it the hardest schedule in the world? No. There's some big games coming up, but all you can do on a schedule like that is just beat the crap out of everybody, and that's exactly what Indiana's done. So what do you think about the top 5? There's not really a whole lot of changes here except for the fact that I went ahead and put old Indiana on up there because we were a little hesitant. We knew Indiana was pretty good. We were a little hesitant to think that they were maybe like for real, like top 10, top 5 good. I'm not really hesitant about that anymore. I think that Indiana has got a chance to really actually do something this season against the big boys in the Big Ten. They're going to get their shot here at the end of the season, and I can't wait. I hope Curtis Rourke is healthy and ready to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's going to be ready next week potentially, or this week, I should say, going up against Michigan State. That it would be a perfect time for him to come back. But even with the backup coming in, it didn't seem like there was much of a drop off, if any at all. Once again, Indiana jumps out to a lead and wins by double digits. It was a pretty dominant win in a game that some figured to be a trap game, coming off of the big win against Nebraska. You know, Indiana, you might have thought would have the mindset coming in that they have arrived. But Kurt Cignetti has proven time and time again that he can get his team up for these games, and he knows how to motivate his players, and that's a really that's a really important aspect of being a coach. He does it at a phenomenal level, and really, when you look at Indiana and their personnel and players, they are they are a very experienced team with a lot of age, a lot of football knowledge on that team, and they're proven that they can do this in year one under under Kurt Cignetti. Really like what Indiana's doing. We'll talk more about their matchup coming up here a little bit later on in the show against Michigan State. That figures to be a pretty good defense that they'll be going up against, and could be a really interesting matchup to watch. Miami at 4. Look, Miami, they've already been through the toughest parts of their schedule. They've got Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Syracuse left on their schedule. I know that they'll be favored in all of those matchups. I don't see a hiccup out of those 4 games, really. I mean, I just would it surprise me if they drop one of those? Not necessarily, but I don't see them losing for the remainder of the year. And then, no Clemson in the regular season. Hopefully we get to see them play one another in the ACC championship. I think that those two teams have been the cream of the crop in the ACC, so to speak, all season long. So very, very much looking forward to that matchup if these two teams can continue to take care of business for the remainder of the year. Penn State, another pretty impressive win, I would say, against Wisconsin. Drew Aller goes out with a knee injury, or maybe an ankle injury, a leg injury, we'll say. Not sure what his status is, but I didn't see much of a drop off when Prebula came in. So, we'll talk a little bit more about hopefully the injury status of Aller. Hopefully, we'll know more by Tuesday coming into the big matchup against Ohio State. But Penn State's still a defensive led football team, and at the end of the day, that's been winning them football games at this point, and they just continue to win. So don't really mind them being in the top 5 or at number 3. Big matchup this weekend. Let's see if they can get it done. Georgia at 2. They were on a bye this week. They didn't move anywhere, rightfully so. Had the biggest win of the season. I think looking at Georgia right now, and also, just as a precursor to our breakdown on Tuesday, Georgia and Florida, really both of those teams were kind of having to recalibrate what they are, because they've got different pieces now. Georgia's getting healthier on the defensive side of the football, and Florida, they got a new quarterback because of an injury to Graham Mertz, and he seems to be igniting that offense, DJ Lagway, that is. So interested to break down that matchup with you on Tuesday, but I like Georgia where they're at right now. If they can continue to play on the defensive side of the football like they did against Texas, then they're going to be a tough team to beat. But I also have said all season long that Georgia's offense is very average. Very average. Not a ton of playmakers on that side of the football. How do they progress moving forward? I do think that if they want to win a national championship, they're going to have to play much better on the offensive side of the football. And then Oregon looks like the most complete team in the country. I mean, they absolutely handled business this week against Illinois. They put on an absolute clinic against Illinois. I don't know that I can look at a more complete football game. And point to a more complete football game. Maybe Indiana against Nebraska, I guess I would say would be, one example of a more complete football game. But nonetheless, Oregon absolutely took care of business this week against Illinois, and just looks like the best team in the country with the best players in the country. They're going to be very tough to beat down the stretch.
Absolutely, no doubt about it, man. Let's jump into these matchups. So we got all that squared away. There's our top 25 headed into week 10. We have got a busy show here, so I want to get it going, and we're going to try to keep each of these breakdowns not short. We don't want to cut anything off, but at the same time, let's move briskly. If you guys have something to add to it in the comment section, I hope that you will go ahead and do that. Let's get going through these games. Let's talk Ole Miss, Arkansas first, man. Ole Miss took a couple of lumps, Mason. They've got a couple of losses. End up, 2 losses is not the worst thing in the world in the SEC at this point. There's other teams with 2 losses. Ole Miss is still hanging in there, but they can't take another one. Now they got to go on the road to Arkansas, who just had an offensive explosion this past week, right? And we know that Arkansas is much improved this season versus where they were at last season. This offensive line is a ton better. This team can run the football effectively now. Taylon Green, we saw maybe the best form of him right last week, at least throwing the ball wise. Over 300 yards passing, a bunch of touchdowns. Jaquindon Jackson, we're thinking, is going to be able to maybe work his way back over the next couple of weeks. I don't know if it'll be for this game, but over the next couple of weeks, they're going to need some help at running back, it seems like. And I'm really more interested beyond all that. All that is very exciting for Arkansas, no doubt. But this defensive line versus this Ole Miss offensive line, I think is the most intriguing matchup in this football game. Arkansas's starting group on that defensive line is not a bad group, guys. They've been left out to dry several times by the offense that has been really good at times and had really tough times this season, right? It's been inconsistent, and namely with turnovers. When Arkansas doesn't turn the football over, they're very difficult to defend. I mean, they are very difficult to defend. And those games where they did turn the ball over, they turned it over 2-3 times. And like I said, left the defense out to dry. If Arkansas can play clean football on the offensive side, I really like the matchup of Arkansas's defensive line against this Ole Miss offensive line that I think has not been very impressive. It's a bunch of mosh posh of guys from all over the country, a bunch of transfers this year. 4 out of 5 guys on that Ole Miss offensive line were transfers. Now, I mean, at this point in the season, we're in week 10. Every position group has got guys that are banged up, and Ole Miss is no different on the offensive line. So I don't think it was that strong of an O-line to begin with. It's even more banged up and wore down at this point in the season. That is the big matchup of this football game to me. It is those lines of scrimmage, specifically Arkansas's D-line versus that Ole Miss offensive line. And then you can kind of flip it around because I think the strength of this Ole Miss team is their defensive line, right? And how is Arkansas's offensive line going to be able to hold those guys at bay to be able to run the football? A lot of read option stuff goes on with Taylon Green in this offense. It's pretty tough to defend. I think that Arkansas is going to be able to attack the edges a little bit. The Arkansas run game is head and shoulders above the Ole Miss run game at this point. And if Arkansas is able to run the ball successfully in this one and hold Ole Miss at bay, man, I think Arkansas's got a pretty direct path to victory here. Plus 6.5. Arkansas is obviously the underdog. Over under set at 55. Before I get my prediction on this, what is your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with you that when you look at Ole Miss's offensive line, they've had some holes, right? And I don't know if there's another team I could point to right now on Arkansas' schedule that I look at and say, okay, that offensive line was pretty comparable. But nonetheless, to me, if Arkansas is going to win this football game, that they've really got to get to Jackson Dart, get into the backfield, slow the running game down. I think Henry Parrish has been one of the best running backs in the SEC so far. The numbers really just kind of prove that. They're averaging almost 5 yards per rush in total, but the passing game is really where Ole Miss makes their makes their hay, or puts the hay in the barn, or whatever little saying there I'm trying to say. But when I look at Ole Miss, I'm wondering a little bit about Trey Harris. What is his status going into this football game? I think he's going to be ready to play, but we saw Ole Miss kind of missing him, I would say, in the game against Oklahoma. That's a really good Oklahoma defense, and it seemed like they were sputtering at times on offense to move the football, and without having Trey Harris there as that safety valve, as he's already had about 900 yards through the air. I think having him would be very, very helpful. Seemed like the game plan without him was to go more to the tight ends, at least early in that game. I saw them targeting the tight ends a good bit more. So what is his status moving forward? That's a big question for me. And then for Arkansas on the other side of the football, another playmaker that could be missing, Jaquinton Jackson. He's a huge part of this offense. Now, he didn't go this week. We saw Russell have a really good game, and the Arkansas run game just did not miss a beat going up against the worst SEC defense in Mississippi State. But also, Russell, what is his status? I saw Big Zero running down the football field with a huge run this past week against Mississippi State, and looked like he maybe pulled a hammy. So, what is his status? Was it just a cramp maybe? I'm not really sure what's going to happen there and what his status is moving forward. If you're an Arkansas fan and please let us know in the comment section because I do think that he is a huge part of this offense, especially if Jackson is not able to go. But really, when I look at Taylon Green, I mean, this guy is doing everything that Bobby Petrino is asking him to do and then some, playing like an absolute stud at quarterback. And to me, if he gets going against this Ole Miss defense, which has been really good, then it could be a long day for Ole Miss. Playing on the road at Arkansas, I really like Arkansas in this matchup. To be honest with you, Mark, I'm looking at Arkansas in this offense, just coming off of a 51-point performance against Mississippi State. This is really going to be probably the best defense that they have faced, other than maybe Tennessee, and I still think that Ole Miss is better than Tennessee on the defensive side of the football. But can they score?
Really?
Like that's the biggest question to me. Can Arkansas score against this Ole Miss defense? I think that they really need to be in the 30s. Whichever team gets to 30 might be the one that ends up winning this football game. But I like Arkansas in this matchup. I know they're 6.5-point dogs, but playing at home, backs against the wall, offense is playing much better as Bobby Petrino installs his offensive system. Give me Arkansas, not just to cover, but to win this one outright.
Yeah, I like Arkansas in this one as well. I want the plus. I want plus the points, but I like how this is setting up for Arkansas. Certainly, going to be a big one there in Fayetteville. Going to be a packed house. Arkansas fans are going to be excited for this one. I think this is just a really good matchup for Arkansas. All right, and let's cut it there. But do you think Ole Miss's defense is better than Tennessee's?
I do. I think that they are comparable on the line of scrimmage, on the defensive side of the football, and really when you look at what they do from a sack perspective, they're not just affecting the quarterback, but they're getting to the quarterback and bringing them down. They had 10 sacks against a terrible Oklahoma offensive line. I get that, but JJ Pegues in the middle, Princely U. I mean, the list goes on and on. There are a ton of players in the middle of that defense and up front on that defense. I do think that they play better, and then too on the back end, we've seen Trey Amos make some plays, and they're not perfect. They're actually pretty comparable to Tennessee in a sense that I do think that they're a little bit weaker on the back end of the defense. But I've seen the defenders for Ole Miss at this point make a few more plays on the back end, and really just have a better pass rush, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they're super comparable. I was just curious. I'm looking at some of their point totals. Well, let me just say this: you like Henry Parrish, and I'm going to leave. We'll go to the next thing. Henry Parrish hasn't been good for a while, and here's the deal: all his stats came from playing nobodies. I mean, literally all of them. He's had 44 yards, 42 yards, 81 yards, 62 yards, 89 yards. Those are his last 5 games. Every 2.9 yards per carry, 3 yards per carry, 3.9 yards per carry, 4.8 and 6.8. That's going back to Georgia Southern. That's 6.8 there. I just the running game sucks for Ole Miss. I mean, if you've got a defensive line with a pulse, that's why I think Arkansas can win this. Because it's like Henry Parrish, the reason he's got the yards he's got is because he's the only running back they have. I mean, that in all reality, I mean, he has 120 carries. The next guy's got 30 or 40. I don't know.
I like him. I like him in space, though. I guess was kind of my point. When he actually has a hole, when they get him the ball in, a screen pass type of situation, get him out wide. I like him with the ball in his hands. So I guess was the point that I was trying to make there.
I get it. I know. I agree.
But that offensive line has got a block up front, and they haven't been able to do that. And I think up against better defenses, they have struggled.
I just looking back at Ole Miss's schedule. I mean, I forgot how bullshit of a schedule they had to start the season. I mean, Furman, Middle Tennessee State, Wake, Georgia Southern, and then Kentucky, in which they lose to Kentucky. How the hell? I don't even know how the hell that happened. Lost to Kentucky at home. That's unbelievable. All right, we got to move on. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. I told Chris in the comment section we do Texas A&M and South Carolina next, so let's jump into that one real quick. Texas A&M going on the road to Williams-Brice Stadium. They're facing off against the Gamecocks. 3.5-point favorites are the Texas A&M Aggies. Over/under set at 46.5. Texas A&M is 9-1 in the last 10 in this series, Mason. Or I think it's really the only 10 in this series, but I digress. 9-1. They've won 9 out of the last 10. The last win for South Carolina coming 2 years ago at Williams-Brice, where they were able to win that one 30-24. Texas A&M won last year 30-17 at Kyle Field. Let's start off with kind of South Carolina. The defense has been really good for South Carolina this season. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. 37th against the pass. That's formidable for sure. And I believe that teams, maybe I'm wrong on this, you all let me know in the comment section. If you're picking your poison, that's probably the poison you'd want to pick with this South Carolina defense is let's attack the secondary. So I think those are pretty good numbers. 37th in the country whenever I feel like that's the poison you'd want to pick with them and the thing that people would want to attack. That's pretty solid. 16th against the run, which is why you'd want to try to pass against this defensive line. Very, very good, especially on the ends. The ends provide a ton of pressure on this defensive line for South Carolina. They've got 28 sacks this season. That's third in the nation. Crazy amount of sacks for South Carolina this year. Very, very good at getting after the quarterback. South Carolina offense, however, has been inconsistent and at times just downright bad. I think the offensive line, it's been really inconsistent, and the way I can explain it is I just think the offensive line is not that great, man. We've seen them even against teams like, I believe it was Citadel earlier in the year, couldn't block the defensive line. I mean, there's just been games where things just weren't working offensively, and that's really been what's hindered this South Carolina team so far this season. And played some pretty decent teams as well this season and hung with them, but just the offense just hadn't been quite good enough. 64th rushing offense, 108th passing offense, and they're not explosive at all, man. Only 89 plays this season from scrimmage of 10 plus yards. That's 114th in the country. They are the definition of not an explosive offense at this point. So going to have to be able to generate something, obviously, offensively against Texas A&M, who seems to have found a spark offensively themselves. We're going to talk about that here in a second. We're going to talk about that right now. Marcel Reed comes in second half of this past week's game against LSU. Very clearly provided a spark. Team went down from 17-7. They were down at halftime to winning the ball game, 30 whatever to 23. It was 36-23, something like that. Totally changed the momentum in the football game and may have changed the momentum for this offense going forward. We're going to have to see. I didn't go and look up a bunch of stats for Texas A&M's offense because it wouldn't really do us any service. This offense looks totally different this past Saturday than what it did in week 2, week 3, week 1. So going back and looking at those stats, I don't think has a whole lot to do with anything with this matchup. I mean, I feel like we need to look at what we've seen the last couple of weeks, and that's a hell of a run game from Texas A&M, and that's really the key to all their success, Mason. I mean, it's very, very clear. Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, those guys, that's the key to stopping this offense or this offense taking off. Their ability to be efficient, and, I mean, they were just absolutely hungry hippo picking up those yards this past week. But let me say this. LSU, while they have been improved in 2024, if you look at their stats, they're in the bottom of the SEC defensively as far as yards given up and things like that. They've created some havoc. Blake Baker has done a good job putting guys in position. I felt like they've gotten better this year defensively. But I think we saw this past weekend, you can run on LSU. You can move the ball on LSU as long as you can do it mistake-free. You're going to have some success and protect your quarterback. South Carolina's not going to be so easy to give up those yards to this offense, Mason. So that's something that I really want to concentrate on this week for sure. Noah Thomas, that's a guy to watch out for at this point. I think that's kind of the downfield threat. Seems like he's really developing and coming into his own for Texas A&M. The defense for Texas A&M, really, really good, especially against the run. 18th in the country, rush defense. I was a little surprised to see, but it is something that I've preached all year, so I kind of knew it in the back of my head. But 93rd in the country as far as pass defense and 81st in the country in opponents' long scrimmage plays given up, and that's plays of 10-plus yards from scrimmage. They've given up 105 of them, and that's 81st in the country. So whereas this Texas A&M defense has been really good on the front, and they've gotten 19 sacks, 57 tackles for loss. That's 36th and 11th in the country. So that kind of furthers my point. They've been really good on the front end, and if teams were able to protect their quarterback, they've been able to have some success in the back end. Now, we saw Texas A&M's defense be able to get turnovers this past week against LSU, and that's obviously an outlier. You can't predict turnovers, but obviously if Texas A&M was able to get some of those this week, then I think that would be a big deal. And I think they've got an opportunity to, as South Carolina has been mistake-prone on offense for sure. Here's the biggest question for me. I know Texas A&M is the better team, right? I think Texas A&M is just as good, maybe a tick behind as far as defensively versus South Carolina, right? I think they're just as good or maybe a tick behind in the secondary. And I think this offense for Texas A&M has – the way they've been playing is much better than South Carolina's. But after coming off of an emotional victory, how do you handle that success, Mason? Texas A&M isn't a team that's just won 12 games a year every single year, and they just, culture-wise, they just know how to, go on the road and win games. And if you look back at Texas A&M this season, almost all their big successes and the good parts of what they've done have been at home. Now you've got to go on the road, and it doesn't matter if South Carolina is 0-6, 0-10, 0-15. Those knucklehead Gamecock fans are going to be out there screaming for their Gamecocks, bud, and it's going to be a loud atmosphere. So I'm interested to see how Texas A&M is able to respond and to the wins, the emotional wins that they've gotten this season, and now you got to go on the road. And how was that offensive line going to respond to that South Carolina defensive front? I think that that's really important. I got Texas A&M winning this thing 24-21 over South Carolina. I think this is a 3-point victory all day. I think Vegas is all over the spread on this one. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot of room for me to get a bet in here. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, well, I think built into the spread is the fact that South Carolina has been so good at forcing turnovers and creating sacks. They're third in the country in sacks, averaging 4 per game. And they're 12th in the country in interceptions, averaging 1.4 per game, 34th in the country in fumbles, averaging just under 1 per game. So to me, it's and Shane Beamer just throughout his career has relied on what we call Beamer ball, right? And that is creating these turnovers, getting special teams involved. To me, that's the path to victory for South Carolina is can they force turnovers? Because their offense has proven time and time again that they just have no ability to move the football. South Carolina cannot really pass the football very well at all. They're at 107th in the country in passing yards per game at just 186 per game. They are, but and then on top of that, when you look at what they give up in sacks, they're 133rd in the country, giving up 4.6 sacks per game. That does not bode well for this offense, and plays right into the hand of the defensive line for Texas A&M. I think that they are absolutely going to eat in this one, especially if South Carolina tries to go out and pass the football. But they look as bad as they've been on offense, and even in running the football, they're averaging 3.7 yards per rush, which is 103rd in the country, but they're stubborn as all get out. They continue to try to run the football. They're 7th in the country, averaging 44 rush attempts per game. That's a lot of running the football when you're averaging 3.7 yards per attempt there. But everything that South Carolina, quote unquote, can do offensively plays right into the hand of Texas A&M. You mentioned the back end of the defense being sort of the weak spot, I guess you could say, for Texas A&M. They looked pretty good in the second half against LSU, mind you. But South Carolina is going to try to run the football. They're going to try to run it 40 times in this football game, and I think that the A&M defense is going to be able to step up. My only concern for A&M in this football game is, like I said, the turnovers, right? The secondary for South Carolina has been really good as of late, as teams kind of realize that if you're going to beat South Carolina, it's probably going to be through the air on the back end of the defense. Well, we've seen them come up with a few really stellar picks against Alabama, against Oklahoma, obviously with the a pick six and a scoop and score as well. The defense has been able to play Beamer ball and get the turnovers and score on defense and special teams. If Texas A&M starts Van Buren, or excuse me, I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name right now, Mark, the quarterback for Texas A&M.
Oh, Reed.
Reed, there we go. I'm thinking of Mississippi State's quarterback.
Too many quarterbacks in our heads, man.
I've been watching too much football today, trying to prepare for all this stuff. So bear with me, y'all. But if Marcel Reed is the starter here, can he protect the football like Connor Wegman has been able to all season long? That's a bit of a question for me. When you look at the interceptions that they've thrown, they're averaging half an interception per game, which is really good. That's 19th in the country. They're 20th in the country in fumbles. Only fumbling the ball once every 5 games. That's really good. can they continue to protect the football in this football game against South Carolina? Because to me, that's the only way that South Carolina climbs back into this football game. I think Texas A&M is going to be able to win this football game. I do have them covering. I think this is going to be a best bet for me this week, as I just feel like Texas A&M has a ton of momentum. I don't think that they're overlooking the Gamecocks in Columbia this week. I think that a Mike Elko coach Texas A&M football team is going to be prepared, and I think that they win by a touchdown this week.
Very good. Very good. You got Texas A&M by a touchdown, you said?
Mm-hmm.
What were you thinking, like 27-20 or something?
It should be lower scoring, I would think, but
Yeah.
I don't know that South Carolina is going to get to 20 without a turnover and a defensive score. I would think it'd be more like 16 for them. That's probably where I'd put their team total. I'd say it's over under 16 and a half, something like that. I really like the Texas A&M defense, and I think that they're going to be in the backfield all day against that offensive line.
Yeah, South Carolina doesn't really have the offense that matches up with them. I mean, it's a terrible matchup for South Carolina. It's strength on strength, and it's to say that anything is a strength for South Carolina's offense is really kind of a stretch. So it's almost like weakness on strength. I don't know how you want to put it, but that offensive line, man, a bad O line going against Texas A&M is that's a bad recipe, man. And I just have to say, number 5, Shamar Turner. Isn't that Shamar Turner, number 5 on the defensive line for A&M?
I get him and Shamar Stewart mixed up. It's like
Which
two
one's number
Shamars
5?
on a team is throwing me off.
Mr. Cobb in the comment section. Which one's 5? Well, I get them confused too. Is it Shamar Turner or whichever one is the number 5? And you're going to know which one I'm talking about if you watch Texas A&M this past Saturday. That dude is mean as shit. I mean, he's trying to like punch people out there and stuff, dude. I mean, this guy, Kirk Herbstreit, was just like appalled during the broadcast. He was just like, keep it on the field, young man. You got to center that frustration. And it's just like, whoa.
That testosterone is what Chris Fowler said. I'm like, I like to call it testosterone.
Chris Fowler talking about testosterone. That's like Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about testosterone. Chris Fowler is like a Hulk dude. He's jacked as hell.
By the way, that is Shamar Turner, number 5. Shamar Stewart is number 4.
Okay.
So that just adds to the confusion that they're both single-digit numbers.
That's a mean dude. That guy's gonna squeeze somebody's head off before the end of the season. Or, man, he's playing on the right side of the ball. Let me just say that he's playing on the right side of the ball, no doubt. All right, we got to keep going through these, man, because your boy got to go to work tonight. What the hell? So we've got 3 more to talk about. Let's see if we can jet through these rather quickly. Let's go Oregon at Michigan next. Oregon going to be on the road going to the Big House. It's a Big 12, or excuse me, not Big 12. Freudian sleep there. Big 10 matchup. Hello. The boys in blue hosting the boys in green. And this is one of those, Mason, where Oregon's got to load up. They got to load up the old PJ, right? And they got to go all the way across the country. And that's a long trip, and that's a big deal, and blah, blah, blah. I don't think it makes a darn bit of difference here, Mason. I don't think it makes a darn bit of difference. I can't find really a huge edge for Michigan in this football game. Let me kind of get into it here. This Michigan offense, we all know what it's been this year, guys. It's been a bit of a disaster. Lots of guys left this program going to the NFL. Coaches left going to the NFL. And it's created a vacuum. And, Sharon Moore was left to just kind of pick up the pieces here for Michigan. This past week, they were able to beat Michigan State, but only had 265 total yards in the game, man. I mean, they're averaging 21.5 points per game this year. That's 111th in the country. They are averaging 173 rush yards per game. That's 52nd in the country. So they are able to run the ball somewhat effectively and somewhat efficiently, is Michigan. We saw Davis Warren this past week. So the quarterback hokey pokey is alive and well out there in Ann Arbor. We've seen 3 different quarterbacks this season for Michigan. So which one are we going to see this week? Take your pick. I don't know how much it matters because this offense isn't really geared towards passing right this second anyway. But the strength of the team definitely lies on the defense, I would say. The 15th best rushing defense in the country, 86th best passing defense in the country, and that factors out to the 38th total defense as far as yards given up total per game. So not a bad defense overall for Michigan. It's not horrible. The passing defensive statistics have actually gotten better as the years went on. We saw at the beginning of the season a little bit of Michigan being susceptible to the pass, just a bit. And they've kind of fixed that a little bit. But as they fix that, teams have been able to run the ball more on them, which is kind of odd. We've seen over the last couple of weeks, we've seen Illinois almost ran for 200 yards on this Michigan defense. So we've seen some teams be able to run the ball a little bit more here lately. Michigan State won the overall rushing battle this past week. And so I'm interested to see which Michigan we get out there. And my real concern about this game at all for Oregon, which I'm not concerned for Oregon losing the game necessarily, but one thing that I think could factor in to making this game a little bit closer is the fact that I'm not in love with Oregon's ability to run the football at this point this season. 61st rushing offense. It's not the strength of this offense at this point. So I think Michigan is going to be able to hold Oregon at bay, running the football for the most part. I don't think this is a situation where Oregon just runs wild running the football. And then, like I said, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen the passing defense get better for Michigan. And so I'm a little bit concerned with how Oregon is going to attack this thing offensively. Already had trouble running the football. Dylan Gabriel has been susceptible to throwing some interceptions too, Mason. And so I'm interested to see that if Michigan can make Oregon one-dimensional in this football game by taking the run away, are they be able to sit back and maybe get an interception or two? That's the only way Michigan has a chance to win this football game, by the way. They're going to have to get a turnover or two. They're going to have to take something away from Oregon. Easier said than done. This Oregon offense, 24th scoring offense in the country. I told you 61st in the country rushing offense, but the 12th best passing offense in the country. They've got a lot of yards through the air. And then defensively, not a whole lot you can pick on there. The 41st rushing defense in the country would be the lowest mark for this defense, but the 12th total defense and 16th best passing defense in the country. It's all going to come down to what Michigan can take away defensively, and are they able to take the football away defensively from Oregon? I don't think it's going to be enough, man. But with this thing being at 14.5, I think the right play on this one is actually Michigan plus the 14.5, Mason. I think that's actually the correct play, but I'm scared to play it, man, because I just think that Oregon is such a sound football team. We've seen them be very versatile. We've seen them win in different ways. What way are we going to see them be able to come out and win this week? That's what I'm most interested to see. And then furthermore, Michigan's offense against this Oregon defense, how are they going to score? What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm kind of with you. I'm anxious to see what Michigan is going to be able to conjure up running the football against Oregon. That's been really good against the run and playing better as the season's gone on really on both sides of the football. I've been really impressed with their trajectory as they, when you look at teams around the country, right? Oregon gets the big win over Ohio State. Prior to that, we had questions about Oregon and whether or not they would be up for that football game. A lot of people were picking Ohio State in that football game. But we've seen Oregon get better week over week. When they made the offensive line changes, that's really when we saw the offense take off. But then defensively too, it seems like they're playing better on the back end. That was a huge question mark. Teams were able to run the football really well. Boise State was able to run the football really well, which isn't really a knock on Oregon's rush defense necessarily. But even since then, it seems like the defense is really starting to click. So I don't know if, and obviously running the football has been Michigan's strong suit. But they haven't done a great job of that either. I mean, like you said, they're 52nd in the country with 172 yards per game. I would not expect them to get to that mark. This is a much better defense than they've faced up front all season long. And to me, if they're not running the football, how are they going to pass the football? Right? We saw Davis Warren step in last week, and he had a really good game. He ended up with I think like a 140 passer rating, 140.2 there. Average 6.5 yards per attempt. 13 completions on 19 attempts, just 123 yards, but at 68% completion percentage. That's probably the best passing performance we've seen by a Michigan quarterback all season long, going up against a Michigan State defense that is really good. But I still don't feel like Michigan has an identity on offense. I think they're still trying to figure that out. I don't know if they're going to figure it out all season long, and this isn't exactly the game for Michigan to come in and get right. This is a tough defense, tough team to play just in general, considering they're the number one team in the country and really surging. So as every other team in America is getting better. As the season goes on, Oregon seems to be doing it at a faster rate than other teams, and that's why they're the number one team in the country right now. When I look at Oregon's attack or offensive attack in this game, I do think that there are there is potential to attack the secondary for Michigan. Will Johnson was out last week against Michigan State. What is his status with a lower body injury? What is his status in this football game? Does he want to come back? I mean, this is a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Does he want to come back and play, or is he going to hang it up as the season seems to be hung up for Michigan? Not saying he's quitting. I have no idea what the young man's going to do. But at this point, he's probably considering his health more so than playing football and winning football for the Wolverines. So to me, I think that this is another opportunity, I guess, for the Oregon offense to go up against still a good defense in Michigan and see what they can do, because they're going to see more defenses similar to Michigan's as the season goes on. I do feel like Oregon should be able to lean on their defense to hold Michigan to really less than 20 points. I think you feel pretty confident in saying that. So can Oregon go out and push the envelope on offense, try some things out, similar to what we saw late in the Illinois game, but hopefully if you're an Oregon fan, be able to put up more points in the second half and just throughout the game in general. But I think that this is a game where Oregon is going to want to see what the offensive line can do up front against a stout Michigan defensive front. Maybe they can establish the line of scrimmage and run the football a little bit better, get some confidence built up going into the end of the season. But offensively, I feel like I give the edge to Oregon. Defensively, I definitely give the edge to Oregon. I wouldn't be surprised if the defense ends up coming away with a score in this one. I think I don't like that it's at 14.5. I really wish I could get this either at 14 or 13.5. Somewhere under 2 touchdowns would be fantastic. So it makes me a little bit weary to bet on this one. But if I had to bet, and I probably won't on this game, I think that Oregon would cover the spread here at 14.5. I think that they can win by 17. The only thing giving me pause is the fact that they got to travel all the way across country, which we've seen teams in the Big Ten in particular struggle with that. I feel like the home field or the home team in these matchups where the team is traveling across country tends to cover, if not win the game outright. So to me, I would stay away from this from a betting perspective, but I think Oregon wins comfortably, regardless of what the final outcome is.
Yeah, I do too. My thing is Vegas put that half a point on there for one reason or another, and it makes me think that they feel really good about a 14-point spread on this one, right? And they're putting that half in there to trip everybody up. We can end the video there. I was going to reference Darth Ducky in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching and commenting and everything. Certainly do appreciate it. Darth Ducky was saying that, he had kind of took issue with the fact that I had said that the Oregon run game hasn't been number one in the country or whatever, and they're not. I mean, the fact of the matter is this is the 61st best rushing offense in the country. I mean, that's not a put down or anything. I mean, it's average, and that's probably all you need for this offense. You can't be the best running team in the country and be the best passing team in the country. I mean, that's just really rare. I mean, I guess theoretically you could, but running back and the running game was something we talked about in the preseason with Oregon that was going to be, not necessarily like the overall strength of this offense. So to say that, it doesn't mean that, we think the run game is bad for Oregon or anything, but this is a pretty decent rush defense for Michigan. And I think Michigan has got to just take something away at this point. I mean, that's Michigan's got to try to simplify this game the best they can. And I think they got a good enough defense to somewhat do that. But Oregon has been pretty balanced as far as, running and passing. I think they're a little heavier passing team than running team. Let's see what else. Wasn't a problem for us on a short week post Ohio State. Granted, that was Purdue, but it was a night game in a full stadium. Yeah, that was actually kind of one. And he said, "Fair enough." Love you, Darth. Thanks for watching, buddy. I certainly do appreciate it, and good luck to your Ducks, man. I'm not betting on this game. I can't do it. That line feels funky to me. Oregon going all the way across the country. I don't have any doubt in my mind or any fiber in my being that has a doubt that Oregon should be the number one team in the country right this second. But even with that being said, I mean, this is college football. And also, I'm interested to hear from you guys if Jordan Birch is going to be back for this one. Maybe Darth, maybe man. But I think that would be very helpful in this game. Obviously, Jordan Birch is a big part of this defense. And I think his pass rushing ability and edge credibility could be really crucial in this one, as you'll be going against one really good running back in Mullins there for Michigan. He's a good one. I mean, he's a really good one, guys. Okay, we got to keep going because I'm running out of time. I always run out of time on Sunday. This is the day I am stretched. All right, let's quickly go through these two, Mason, like real quick. And let me get to my page here. Kentucky at Tennessee. This game's lost a little bit of luster, Mason, but still a very important game, kind of a border war, if you will. Two teams or two states that kind of touch one another. Tennessee owns Kentucky for the most part in this series. You got a Kentucky win sprinkled in every once in a while. This is one of the worst Kentucky teams that we've seen as of late, in my opinion. And it sure seems like this Kentucky team has quit, Mason, in some facet. Gave up over 300 yards rushing last week to Auburn. 275 yards to Jarquez Hunter. I'm sure that's his best game he's ever had in his career. It takes a lot of effort to play defense and stop the run. And that's a bad situation for Kentucky in this football game, as Tennessee is one of the best running teams in the country with Dylan Sampson. I think Tennessee's going to be able to lean on this Kentucky team unless Kentucky comes back to life this week, right? It is Halloween. Are we going to see zombie Kentucky, right? Are we going to see zombie Kentucky pop back out of their casket and, I'm here to play defense? I don't know, man. And it scares me as far as like betting on this game or making a call, because look, if this game was played earlier in the season, Kentucky's defensive line had it popping, man. I mean, had beat Ole Miss, held Georgia intact, really caused a lot of disruption for Georgia, and it was because of this defensive line of Kentucky. And then we see last week where they give up over 300 yards rushing. So which is it? Which one are we getting? We've got some Kentucky fans here on the channel. You guys let me know, is this team checked out? Are they done? Has the offense lost their interest to listen to Bush Hamden and this offensive coordinator? Because it sure does seem like this offense is kind of just lost in the desert at this point, right? Who's playing quarterback? Is it Wimsat? Is it Vandegrift? I'd love to hear from you guys, but Tennessee has got an obvious direct path to win this football game. They're 15.5-point favorites, which is absolutely massive in an SEC conference game. I think Tennessee could come out here and run, and win this football game. But will Tennessee come out and try to further develop the passing game for Nico and get ready for things that are down the road? Nico hasn't played all that great this season. I mean, it could have been worse in some spots, and it could have certainly been better in others. It's his first year as a starter. He's getting those SEC lumps, right? He's earning those stripes. Is this an opportunity, if you can get somewhat of an early lead or a buffer, to be able to work on some of that passing game and try to grind through some of the issues that we've seen? Bad news, I guess, a little bit if Kentucky decides to show up and actually play football this week, because I think this is a great defensive line. I think they can cause havoc with Nico behind the line of scrimmage if Tennessee decides they want to work on that passing game a little bit in this game. So we'll see which team we get. I'm scared to death to try to pick one side or the other as far as the point spread on this one. I feel like public perception is all over the place for Kentucky, and I feel like public perception for Tennessee is also all over the place. Really sound defense for Tennessee. I'm not worried about Kentucky scoring a lot of points. I think there is under potential in this game if Kentucky does decide to show up and play. But if not, watch out for the over, because I think Tennessee could. If Kentucky has quit, I think Tennessee could run away with this one at home. What do you think?
Well, I think if you're Tennessee, I don't really feel like Kentucky is the best team to play around with and try to pass the football and work some things out, because we saw Tennessee lose to Arkansas, and really it was because of the inability to pass the football. Couple that with Kentucky's ability when they're playing their best to limit possessions, to run the football well, to extend drives, and slow or I guess really speed the whole game up in a sense of the time of the game. That's when Kentucky is at its best. So to me, if you're Tennessee, I think you look next week on the schedule. You got Mississippi State to get ready for Georgia. Mississippi State is a team that you might want to try some things out on offense a little bit more. Coming off of a bye week, though, you never know. Maybe they look at this opportunity as a test for Nico, and maybe they do get him going a little bit more. But I think my approach would be to kind of build the confidence up in Nico and keep the pass attempts around, in the low 20s, I would say, in this football game, and just let him build up some confidence, because we know the ability is there. We saw him hit some plays late against Alabama to win that football game. I want to see him look a little bit more confident out there and feel like he can really push the ball downfield. We haven't seen that since the beginning of the football season. But when I look at Kentucky, I mean, I go back to what I just said. When they're playing at their best, they're speeding the game up, they're running the football, taking time off the clock, extending drives, and limiting possessions for the opposing offense. Defensively, they do a great job of stopping the run up front, which is exactly what Tennessee has wanted to do. But we've seen in the past couple of weeks, they've really struggled defensively up front. I mean, like you said, they gave up over 300 yards on the ground last week against Auburn. They let DJ Lagway in Florida beat the dog crap out of them. I mean, it was that was absolutely not. It kind of came out of left field to me. I was absolutely surprised by that. But like you said, what version of Kentucky shows up? what version of Tennessee shows up offensively. I feel really good about Tennessee's defense in this one. That's a big question for me, but ultimately I'm staying away from this one as well. I think if I had to lean, I would lean Kentucky to show up and cover in this football game. For whatever reason, Kentucky tends to play better on the road than they do at home.
That's true.
But I think Kentucky could kind of get up for this one and keep it close. I've got Tennessee winning this all day, but I think that Kentucky could kind of make this a 13 or 14 point football game, which scares me away from the spread. On the over and under, I kind of really like the under. If I were to lean one way or another, I feel like if Kentucky is going to have success on the offensive side of the football, you're limiting the possessions and limiting the ability to score really for both teams because the game's going to be sped up so much. So leaning under, leaning a Kentucky cover here. Tennessee wins the football game.
Yeah, I like this one. Tennessee 35, Kentucky 9, and that would hit for an under. All right, let's get this last one done. And Darth Ducky, you little turd, he jumped out of here. He hit us with a go Jackets, and then said adios. I said, "What are you, gay? Come on, man." And I'm kidding. I don't really care. I don't care if you're gay, but I mean, that would be a pretty big indicator if you were a Georgia Tech fan. I mean, I'm just saying. What? Nobody says that, Darth. You're obviously not from here, but in the state of Georgia, nobody utters the words "Go Jackets." Because why would you? That would be embarrassing. You don't want to let anybody know that you're a Georgia Tech fan. That's weird. The way that you show your pride as a Georgia Tech graduate is you just pull up really quietly in your Mercedes and you park away from everyone so that nobody scratches your nice car, and you keep to yourself and you make hundreds of $1,000s a year. You don't say "Go Jackets," You just you're just a really rich engineer. That's pretty much just it, man. No pride in football. That Georgia Tech is selling their home games to Mercedes-Benz Stadium for $10 million a piece right now. So, don't you ever say "Go Jackets" on my show again. We have no Georgia Tech fan nerds here, okay? All right, let's finish this up. I just had to throw that out there. Little Georgia Tech slander for you here on a Sunday night. Which one do we have left? Indiana, Michigan State. Yeah. All right. I don't have a ton on this one, so let's jump into it. Indiana going on the road to Michigan State. Indiana is just the absolute powerhouse that is Hoosier football there in the Big Ten at this point. Undefeated. Unbelievable season so far. Is Curtis Rourke coming back this week? Is his hand ready? Is it going to be another week? I'm not sure. Indiana only favored by 7 in this one, Mason. So I'm interested to see what your thoughts are. I don't know anyway. Indiana has been a covering machine all season, beating the snot out of people. Michigan State, on the other hand, thought they were going to be able to beat their big brothers last week, right? And couldn't get it done. An emotional loss, I would say, in that one, as benches cleared at the end of the football game, all this stuff, little bro, big bro, Colston Loveland talking junk on the social media, all pretty much just a big distraction for Michigan State at this point. Indiana's going to go on the road. They're one of the best coach teams in the country. Cignetti is really, really good. We talked about it yesterday. As Georgia Bulldogs fans, we just pray that Kurt Cignetti doesn't somehow end up at the Florida Gators or the Auburn Tigers or something like that, right? Stay over there in Indiana. Your work's not done over there yet, Mr. Cignetti. We need you to just go ahead and stay over there. And I kid, but this guy, I'm telling you, he's a drill sergeant of a coach if I've ever seen one. He's got these guys in line. He's got them playing proper football, complementary football. I'm going to continue to ride this Indiana wave. I'm picking them as a favorite in this game to cover. They've beat the stew out of everybody they played. Haven't trailed in a football game yet this year. Haven't beat anybody by less than 10 points this season. What's not to like here about Indiana? What are your thoughts on this game, Mason? I like Indiana to win this thing by like 10 or 14 points, but I don't know what's going on with Curtis Rourke. Is he coming back? Is he not? Does it matter? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it sounds like he's going to be back just based on everything we were hearing going into the football game last week. It really sounded like they just wanted to give him one more week of rest. I certainly hope for Indiana's sake that he is back. He's very fun to watch. One of the best quarterbacks in college football from a statistical standpoint. But this entire team for Indiana has been has been phenomenal statistically. I mean, like you said, they haven't had to play from behind all season long. How does that look? I mean, if they do get behind in a football game, what do they look like? I don't imagine that they're going to look any different, but we haven't seen that yet. And we are due for a letdown game at some point. Like it would be pretty remarkable if they were to win out at this rate. Like no team does that. Even the most elite football teams in years past haven't done what Indiana is doing right now. So at some point, I do expect a letdown game in some way. Maybe they don't lose the game, but maybe they don't cover. Maybe they have to come from behind and win on a last second field goal or something like that. Could this be the game? That's kind of my biggest question mark. We're just looking at Indiana. I'm kind of just waiting on the other shoe to drop at some point, and they keep surprising me, week in and week out, and how dominant that they play on both sides of the football. I can't say enough about the team and what they've been able to do so far this year. But even with the other quarterback coming in, assuming Curtis Rourke is not able to go, I mean Taven Jackson has been playing really well. They're not asking him to do a ton. He had 19 attempts for 124 yards against Washington, completed right at 58%, had one touchdown, one interception, but looked like he knew where he wanted to go with the football. Looked like he had proper checkdowns. He was making good reads, and they really didn't have to change the game plan. And I think that was the biggest thing for this offense, that they were able to run the same system. Nothing was changed. He seemed to be on the same page with his receivers. I didn't see a ton of drop off with Curtis Rourke leaving, and that is very surprising considering how good he's played. For Michigan State, love the defense. Like you talk about a first year coach that coaches really well. Well, you got Signetti on one side, who's in line or at the front of the line, I would say, for Coach of the Year at this point. But then Jonathan Smith on the other side has really developed his team quite well. Look, this was a Michigan State team that had a lot of off-the-field distractions for the past couple of years. They've had a ton of issues with Mel Tucker, texting who was it? The HR
What do you
manager
call
or
him?
something?
Was it what? I thought his name was Mel Tugger. Was that right? Is Tucker?
He does tug. He's tugging on something these days. I don't even want to open that can of worms. Off the field issues, go look it up.
I don't even want to open that. I don't even want to open that can of lotion.
Yeah.
I hate making fun of Mel Tucker. He was the ex-Georgia guy, and he was so nice. Didn't you run into him one day at the Braves Stadium?
I did. I ran into him and his family.
The elevator opened up, and he was going, "Oh shit!"
Yeah,
and then he pulled it. Oh, I'm just kidding.
He was on the phone with somebody and was having a good time.
Pulled a Louis C.K. on you.
Yeah, my gosh. Mel Tucker, I kind of forgot about him, but
welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. If you're
Michigan
new here.
State, though, had a ton of issues, right? So you bring in a guy like Jonathan Smith. I think it was a hell of a hire. I think it was a perfect hire for Michigan State, to be honest with you. He brings over Aiden Childs. Really like Aiden Childs. I think he's playing pretty good football in his first year as a starter, as a redshirt freshman, making some mistakes like all freshmen do at some point or another. But he's got a really good weapon to throw to in Nick Marsh. And I don't think that Nick Marsh is getting the talk that he deserves as a true freshman receiver. He's probably third on my list of true freshman receivers at this point. When you look at, obviously Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams and what they've been able to do. Well, Nick Marsh is one of those guys who's like a one of one. To see that one touchdown he had against Michigan where he catches the ball and goes one way and then, fakes one way and then completely runs like 10 yards around the two defenders to the pylon. I mean, it was a pretty incredible run. And he's been doing that all season. He's a safety valve for Aiden Childs. I do think that he makes some plays this week against Indiana. I think Indiana might be in for a little bit of a close football game for once this season. Especially when you look at what Michigan State does on the defensive side of the football. I think they can be a problem if everything is clicking. So, but with that being said, I still really like Indiana. They're top 5 in our top 25 this week, and I like Indiana to win this game. I'm not betting on this game. I'll go ahead and tell you that. Because I do think that we're due for a little bit of a letdown from the Hoosiers, but I think that they win this one. Wouldn't be surprised if they cover. Wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State keeps it close. But give me Indiana to win this one.
So what you're saying is Michigan State is going to need another stroke of good luck to win this one, right?
I would say so.
All right, I'm with you, man. Give me Indiana. I'm not jumping off of this train until I have a reason to. So give me Indiana to cover. Until they don't again. All right, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and I'm surprised it's taken us this long to hit everybody with the Michigan State jokes.
Yeah,
we got to be more on top of that type of stuff, Mason. I mean, we got to. It's one of those things, we talk about during the week. How do we make the show better? Well, you can't let a stroke of good luck slip through the cracks like that. We gotta talk about more stuff like that, man.
Some more dad jokes is what you're saying. We just need more dad jokes on the show.
Maybe dirty dad jokes, I guess. Technically, I don't know what you want to call it, guys. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. We certainly do appreciate it. You guys have been awesome. Thanks for commenting in the comment section. If you hadn't done it, please hit that like button for us real quick. It's really simple, easy, free. Can't say that about a whole lot of things, but it helps you boys out a ton, and we certainly do appreciate it. We have a lot of fun out here, but we'd also put a lot of effort into it. So even if it doesn't look like it on screen sometimes, but give us that like button. It's just a little acknowledgement of appreciation there, and kind of keeps the trend going and gets us out there in the algorithm and gets the word out about First and Long. We would certainly appreciate it. We'll be back on Tuesday evening. We've got our big previews and predictions. We went through some of the secondary matchups today in our top 25. If you missed it, go back and take a look. It's all going to be out there and chopped up in the videos portion of our page there. Until Tuesday night, we're signing out. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. Thanks for watching the First and Long College Football Show.